maybe comparing two areas, which one is more rich with species, higher biodiversity. No? So this is very important concept, especially in conservation efforts. No? Also, we relate the richness to the uh, function of a given ecosystem. Why is it that a community that is species rich is efficient in terms of services, ecological services, compared with one that is poor? No? And then this would also lead into the changes that usually takes place in ecosystems. When we say changes, uh, that can be due to disturbances like after a fire or after a storm, or maybe starting from the primary uh, development of a community. When you say primary, when there is no much life yet, no? Like when you just have as a big boulder of rock, no? And later on, after many, many, many years, that would become an ecosystem uh, with vibrant with life, no? We call that succession of communities. Now, a more what's this important question would be: is succession predictable? Can we predict or can we not predict? That's part of community ecology. And then, of course, community ecology would also include the study of island biogeography. Mm. So, island biogeography would explain how species diversify as they disperse across islands. So that will be the content of this big topic on community ecology. So maybe tingnan natin kung hanggang saan lang tayo, no? Uh, we'll talk about species diversity first, but I am not very sure if I'll be able to finish all this, no? But under this, uh, in the book, it's a separate chapter. Under this topic, we will talk about the nature of communities first, no? And the various techniques to measure attributes, no? Like diversity, dominance, abundance, etc. No? So, ito, titingnan natin ito. No? So, that would be under species diversity. Okay. So, let's start with the nature first. Nature. Now, there had been so much debate on how to explain a community, an ecosystem. Hmm? Now, before, uh, ecologists are divided with these two models, no? The organismic and individualistic model. To explain the nature of a community, although the more older one is the organismic level, and the recent is the individualistic model. Huh? So let's compare these two. So an organismic model, of course, comes from the concept of an organism. Now, what's an organism? An individual organism. I am an organism. Uh, a tree is an organism. A bacteria is an organism. Now, an organism consists of several systems, diba? Uh, circulatory, digestive, etc. And these systems should work properly, should function normally in order to maintain the life of the organism. Huh? So according to Frederick Clements, an ecosystem or a community is like an organism, whereby there are parts, and those parts are related to each other, no? And should function normally so that the life of the community can continue. No? So what are the parts, therefore, in this concept of community? They are the individuals, the populations, different populations, and the communities. Communities where you have both the biotic and the abiotic components interacting. So, relationship interaction is very important. No? And so, according to this model, if there is a change in the community, like for example, it was once a grassland, and then after hundred of years, naging forest, or maybe isang forest naging desert. No? Those are changes. According to this model, these changes are predictable. And if there are changes in the community, it will tend to go back to its original form. Of course, after uh, many years. No? And what dictates, or what brings about these changes, or what initiates these changes? According to Clements, it's the competition, no, between the plant species that fuel these changes in the community, which are predictable. No? So yan ang organismic level model. But, syempre, um, nag-i-improve ang pag-iisip ng tao. No? There is revolution even with what's this? Revolutions with theories and principles. No? In 1926, Henry Allen Gleason, hmm, uh, proposed another model, which is the individualistic. Now, bakit in individualistic? According to Gleason, a community, take note that our definition in the first slide seems to depict already, no, part of Gleason's individualistic model. It's an assembly of species that's coexisting primarily because of similarities in their physiological requirements and tolerances. So Gleason here recognizes now the uniqueness, uniqueness of different kinds of species of organisms. The uniqueness, but even though each one is unique from each other, there is the possibility that they can coexist. Yeah? They can coexist. Yeah? And so, Gleason uh, would presuppose that distinctly structured communities that Clements proposed, no, do not exist. Yung kay Clements, highly structured siya, no? Distinctly structured. According to Gleason, no, it's not. Because there is a gradient that's caused by the environment. No? So each group of species would adjust, no? Would adjust with the gradient. Ano ibig sabihin ng gradient pagkakaiba? Like for example, differences in temperature, differences in the altitude, no? Differences in the habitat. One is an aquatic, the other one is terrestrial. No? So in this model, no, communities do not necessarily have sharp boundaries na sinasabi ni Clements. And communities overlap. And therefore, species are less predictable. No? Etong sabi ni Clements na changes can be predictable. That's the opposite here with Gleason. No? So, ecologists debated, maraming mga exchange of ideas, mga debates, but there had also been experiments conducted trying to look into these two models. No? Now, one of those experiments was by Robert Whittaker, which has taken its a foothold, no, in the field of ecology, no, and even until now, no. So it is called the principle of species individuality. So siguro uh, nag-experiment siya looking into both the individualistic and organismic level. Not only with Taker, many others actually have experimented, but we'll just mention this one because this is the most prominent. No? So what is this principle of species individuality? Uh, so according to this, each species is distributed according to its needs. So, kung saan nasasatisfy yung needs niya, dun yung kanyang niche. No? That most communities intergrade continuously. This is the overlapping. And that competition does not create distinct vegetational zones because in fact competition is a very important ecological relationship. Nakita natin yan sa mga sa sharing nila Michelle and PJ, no? So it's considered, no? So like for example, let's consider moisture gradient. That's part of the environment, no? The moisture gradient that's present on the slope of a mountain, di ba? So if you have a mountain, no? So there will be moisture gradient on top, at the middle, and on the bottom part of the mountain. No? So consider using this as a point for illustrating the principle of species individuality. Whittaker proposed four hypotheses. No? So what are these four hypotheses that Whittaker suggested? No? So we had a four, one, two, three, four. No? So the first hypothesis that Whittaker had is that competition causes sharp boundaries between groups of species. That means certain species group together. Certain species group together. So competing species, including dominant plants, no, exclude one another along sharp boundaries. Sino ang magsusubsist sa isang boundary? Those that can tolerate, no? That can tolerate the conditions. Now, other species will evolve on a very close, maybe mutually beneficial association with each other and with the dominant species. No? So, communities, therefore, develop along the gradients. May mga communities sa middle part, o kaya sa pinakamataas, o kaya sa pinakamababa. No? So, on each community, there is a group of interacting species. No? And if you notice, this corresponds to the Clements organismic model. Now, para bang continuum itong hypothesis na to, na kung saan yung pinaka-extreme, the other extreme of the hypothesis would also show Gleason's individualistic model, yung hypothesis 4. Tingnan muna natin ito bago tayo pumunta sa dalawang median hypothesis. So, the fourth hypothesis says that competition does not cause sharp boundary. That's the opposite of what is being said here, no? In the first hypothesis. Different species do not group together due to physical variables. No? They did not group together. So that is basically Gleasonian in nature. So competition does not cause sharp boundaries, and the adaptation of species to similar of variables in the ecosystem does not produce well-defined groups. Hmm? So, etong mga centers and boundaries of populations are basically scattered along the gradient. Hmm? So, the distribution. Therefore, there is a difference in the distribution uh, in this kind of hypothesis and the first one. Yeah? So, that's basically the Gleasonian's individualistic model. And in between, you have two other species, two other hypotheses rather, that that Whittaker added. No? The hypothesis close to the Clements organismic model states that competition causes sharp boundaries, katulad pa rin doon, no, between species, and different species do not form groups. So that this is already different from the second point of Clements here. And then let's look at the third hypothesis. So obviously, it's now a different contention with regards to competition. This hypothesis is saying that competition does not cause a sharp boundary. Gleason na yan, no? And certain species group together due to physical variables. And this is where Gleason's model is different now. No? So makikita natin yung kaunting, deviations, kumbaga, yung uniqueness ng bawat hypothesis na to. No? And these are Whittakers. Na? So what did Whittaker do? Of course, he had some experiments. He tested the possibility of the four by examining a vegetation on a mountain in the western US. So what he did, he got samples of the plants in different elevations. So grabbing some plant collection siguro, no? Maybe classify these plants, hmm, and then collected so much data on physical variables. Maybe, syempre, kasama na dun yung altitude, maybe yung moisture sinama niya, yung temperature, soil moisture, etc. Na? Okay. So, got the data, recorded, analyzed the data, and the results of Whittaker's experiment or observation supported the fourth hypothesis. And what is the fourth hypothesis? That is Gleason's model. That competition does not produce sharp boundaries. There are overlaps. No? And and that adaptation is possible. No? Adaptation. Who adapts? The organisms. They adapt to the physical environment and therefore will not result in defined groups of species. So that's the fourth hypothesis. Uh, kaya until now, when we are talking about principles on the nature of species, we are more inclined on Gleason. Huh? Actually, it's not the Gleasonian that is emphasized, but Whittaker na. No? So what are the conclusions of Whittaker?